So one of the things that Kevin had just been going over is top 10 mistakes that DBAs make, and a couple of things I just wanted to kind of go over within that was some areas that I found to be very helpful. One of the things that I've found is a pretty frustrating experience whenever I'm working with SQL Server. Hold on a second. All right, is working with link servers. I know we all, whenever we're working with link servers, we have great named link servers, and we know exactly what kind of queries are always running across them and everything. So unfortunately, I've run into a couple other situations that reality is very different. The situation that caused me to be able to write these extended event sessions came from a situation where a company bought another company. They fired all the old IT staff, and they said, "Hey, what's using these databases?" And one of the aspects was needed to know how the link servers were being used. And awesomely enough, the application was a very ununique name, and it was actually just called like table was the name of their link server. So it was a very well used term, and a solution they said was, well, why don't we just monitor, we'll look through everything that says the word table in it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This will just take forever. You're gonna try Profiler, you're gonna look at every statement with the word table in it. This is just not going to work. So within extended events, there are some really good events for finding out what's going on your link servers. I think there's actually 4 specific events that are in there. We're going to focus on 2 of them today. One of the other ones, and I'll pull it up at the end, is more for creating a link server, adding a link, modifying a link server, changing a credential, or adding an impersonation. The kind of more of the administrative stuff with regarding to link servers, and that's what that event watches. So if you are worried about any of that, there is an event specifically for that. So what I want to do is I want to show how I solved some problems and an issue that came up while I was trying to do this. We're going to start off by looking at the event called OLEDB data read, because anytime you're looking at link servers, this is actually the event that's going to fire in SQL Server, and it's going to be able to go ahead and do that. Do note, on my slide here, I have the mass dispatch latency set down to 3 seconds. Do not do this in production. This is just for demo purposes. I recommend, if you look at my GitHub for these scripts, I think it's at 60 seconds, but it can cause some issues if you have it too low. So do be aware of that. Also, in your production, you may, depending on how much you use, modify your max memory, but those can be tweaked. Specifically, I'm doing 2 different targets here. I'm doing it to a file target that I'm going to save out to the C temp directory, max size 256, and it'll roll over to 5 times, change it as you need. And then also the histogram target. I love the histogram target. It is probably my new favorite target. I'm currently grouping it on the OLEDB data read column, and I'm using just this event. I currently have it at 10,000 slots, and I'm filtering on the T-SQL stack. And we'll go over why. So I'll go ahead and create this. I knew that was going to happen. Of course, you can't, do something and then not have a demo you forgot to clean up. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and start it. And so I just want to show, here are some of the queries I use to select. They are empty. That's all I'm showing you here, is that they're empty. I have created a link server. Obviously, my link server probably has a much more different name than easier to find. If you had to look for, Deadpool, / SQL Server 2019-2, probably be easier. Maybe if you're a profiler and you're looking for that name, it's more unique. But again, in my original scenario, I was looking for table. I was like, oh my gosh, this is awful. And so we're just going to send some queries across, and it pulls some data back. Do kind of be aware, this was only 18 rows, okay? and I'll just comment that here, 18 rows. And then we're also going to do this one. We're going to just select a different table. And this one came back with 11 rows. And they're short, they're small row, or they're small width. All right. And I also am going to create this one. This one probably is already created, but we have creator alter. And I'll show you why I did that as well. So let's take a look. We'll run this procedure. And again, I'm just doing this to generate some information. We ran it with the word retire. We got 1 row back, and this one came back 0. So this one was 1, and this one was 0. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go look at those, what we came back with. Now this is using xQuery. I will be honest, if you ever have to use xQuery, which the majority of the time I use with extended events, I find it very functional to do it. There are so many examples that I have saved on my GitHub. I just find one that kind of works and make some modifications. If you do have issues with xQuery, I'm not an expert, but I dive into any of the issues that I do have with it, and I go headlong into it and try to find how to write it. All right, so we'll pull this back. I have 240 rows that came back. Now, that's a lot. Hold on a second. We only had, where was it? We had 18 rows here, 11 rows here, 1 row here, and 0 rows here, but we have 240 rows. And that's because the way this actually pulls the data back is it says every time the OLEDB data read event happens, it's saying, hey, I'm getting some data that's coming back across the OLEDB, and I'm going to say that's an event. And so you can see as we're looking at the SQL text here, it's just a lot of the same stuff. We've got a couple hundred rows, or maybe not a couple hundred, but we've got, what are we looking at? 98 rows for that 18 row result set. So it's kind of chatty. The other thing I found that was very interesting is because I'm using the SQL text, or the SQL text in the event target. One of the things you might be aware of is in SQL Profiler, you have this, and also within extended events, there are certain keywords that SQL Server says, hey, if these words or stored procedures are executed, we're just going to obfuscate the whole thing. And so on my second query here, you can see I just said select the name column, and we're going to alias it password. But because we did that, it says, no, I'm not going to tell you what happened. And there is even certain ways that, if you do impersonation with link servers, that it will say, oh, hey, you're passing credentials across. We're going to obfuscate everything that comes across. So how do you find out what your link server is doing? I see that, I got some get rows. This guy, this user did it through Management Studio. Yay me. That doesn't help me. We can keep going down, and when we executed those stored procedures, we show the data of the stored procedure. Let me see where that was. Pull that. Oh, great. Yeah, stored procedure right here is just that. Select name as password. Well, because it has that keyword right there as password, SQL Server automatically obfuscates it. So you don't have any information now of really what's going on. So it can be very frustrating. That's why I decided to use the histogram target, and specifically using the T-SQL stack. And so let's take a look at how this pulls it out. I probably just renamed it. Yep. All right. So this is actually some information. None of this is obfuscated. It says we ran this procedure, and it does say 62 times. Now, again, that's taking all those data reads, and that's grouping it. But as you can see how much less data this is taking. It's basically uniquifying all of your different string or executions that you're running across your link server. So this one says it was ran 62 times. It's not that we all saw I didn't execute it 62 times, but the data read option was executed, and now I can see that. When I executed those stored procedures, it does give me the text. Now, it doesn't give me what the parameters that were passed in, but it does give me the text. And as you can see, we have the other ones, even select name as password. It did give me that information. So stored procedures, it'll give you the, it can get you the information. It's not going to give you the parameters, but at least, hey, now I've got some information of what's going on my link server. And I don't have to set a very wide, profiler to say, give me all the text that includes this. You're looking at a very specific event just when this is happening. Now, I did notice something that was very interesting. If we see here, there's a query that didn't result anything. And it was actually, I believe, when we ran it this time. And the reason I actually found that sometimes, or we can actually do this, let's say where record equals foo. We'll just do it this way. We'll run it this. Oh, I have to put a where clause in there. Don't type during demos. Still not working. Where name, even better. Still, don't type during demos. Came back with 0 results. Now, if we go ahead and still query that from the histogram target, we're not going to get it. We're not going to get a hit on this. Now, again, we've already waited the 3 seconds. It's not showing up. And the reason it's not showing up with this event, and I found this out while doing this demo, is the OLEDB data read event only fires when data is being sent back across the line. So you might want to use this if you're specifically saying like, hey, who's bringing a lot of data? Do know that the slot count that you would be getting from this query is going to directly correlate to how much data is coming across. I don't know the actual mathematics of saying like this many bytes is this much count. I haven't figured that out yet, but there is a relation to saying, hey, you're sending 3 columns that are all char 1 is going to be a lot less of a slot count than if somebody is saying 200 columns that are all full of varchar max. The counts will be much higher with the varchar max. So you can kind of see how much data is coming across. If I do find out, what the relationship is size-wise to OLEDB data read, I'd post that on my GitHub. I did, however, find that if you wanted to create and just know what's being executed across, you can use this version, which actually uses the OLEDB query interface. And it's very similar, but it's capturing specifically the queries that are running across. It still does multiple fetches in regards to not just one query back and forth because of the way the OLEDB data driver handles the interchange. It is less, but it will capture those situations where you're returning 0 rows. It would still capture that, hey, a query was still sent. All right, let's go down. And these are just some extra checks on like how you can look at the query interface. All these would be on my GitHub as well in regards to how to pull that. So again, some queries or ways of permissions are passed for link servers can cause errors or cause it that if you're just looking at the SQL text that you won't be able to see it, the SQL text action. What we actually do, just to kind of go the short of this, the reason this works is that it actually takes the T-SQL stack event, or the T-SQL stack action that you're getting, and it parses it and cross-applies it over the dmexec SQL text DMB. And so you're actually pulling it out of your planned cache. So if this is something that you're needing to kind of be aware of, do know you kind of have the limitations. Hey, if it ages out of cache, you're going to have to figure, you're going to have to run this query more often. On my GitHub, I do have a portion of it where it automatically has a job, it runs, and then it merges into a table, and it takes the information, it merges it over to keep it of all the unique ones that we're running. That was the specific situation we were running into for when I found this one out. So in regards to that, are there any questions on that one? Okay. All right. Well, I will go and continue. The next one I have is legitimately one that I have been putting together, and I run this on nearly every single system that I work on. And it is just give me information about whenever SQL Server populates an error reported message. I love knowing what's going on my systems. I know that one of the reasons why I looked into this was I didn't know of an easy way to track when SP configured changes were happening on a system. I was working with a client, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, every day, performance went to like just awful. And in about 15 minutes, everything was fine. CPU wasn't spiking. And I'm just like, what's going on? And I was able to find out that at that time, compilations just shot up on the server. And I'm like, well, what's causing that? And I needed to find a way to figure it out. And I actually started then monitoring the system for configuration changes, and SP configure, which is actually error 15457, would capture this information. And I was legitimately finding that somewhere in the application code, somebody still left it on a configure mode, and it would calculate the new max server memory, set it down to 4 gigs of memory, and then set it back up every day at 3 o'clock, wiping out the plan cache and just, thrashing the SQL Server for low memory for a little bit, and then rebuilds all the plans. And it was just awful on the amount of damage that was doing. And having this where I could pull the app name, the login name, what was running, who was running it, I was able to say, hey, look, your app is resetting my memory. And they're like, well, it doesn't do that. Well, it did. Oh, well, we left it in configure mode. Yeah, can we turn that off? I'm not going to run this one. This one's currently running on here because I wanted to show you kind of some of the stuff that I get, and maybe more why I use this. So I leave this running on every system, and right now I've got 298 errors. I specifically, kind of as a base, I want everything Sev 16 and greater. And I also have a couple specific ones that I've chosen as well. These are mostly applying to permissions issues. The reason I like capturing all the permissions issues is because as a DBA, I got tired of people saying, hey, I need sysadmin to do my job. Really? Why? And they couldn't tell me, and they would end up saying, well, I'm going to go to my manager, and my manager's going to yell at your manager until I get sysadmin. And then that's usually what ended up happening. Or they need DB owner or something. And so I compiled a list of some of the error numbers of, hey, you don't have permission to select from this table, you don't have execute permissions, you don't have a lot of different permissions. And this allowed me to be able to say, oh, you're requesting sysadmin, but I saw yesterday you were just trying to do a select statement on a database that you hadn't been given access to. So I'll tell my boss that you just need select access, or you just need DB data reader, and that'll resolve what you're doing. It's also something that I was able to start tracking and say, hey, there are issues, there are errors that are going on the system. I'm already knowing what they are. Maybe it's SSPI handshake errors, maybe lots of various errors. Many of the ones that Kevin was talking about earlier, the Sev 18, 19, 20, those are very important. Still agree to put them on an alert to get an email. But instead of necessarily having a kickoff and say, let's run add a mechanic SP who is active, we can find out exactly what was running it, what caused the error, and have it automatically tracking that for historical purposes. As you can see, I really am bad at, I haven't plugged in my external tape drive for where I run my backups, and it's very happy to tell me that. The F drive does not exist right now. And so every single one of my database integrity checks, every single one of my backups for my laptop here have actually all been failing. Well, that's not good. Definitely want to get that addressed. And I have it storing out here, and it's saving that. But again, some of the ones I was looking at earlier, hey, somebody's trying to create an object of something that already exists. Well, let's take a look at that. You know, here's the error reported, and here's what they were trying to run. Oh, well, maybe I don't need to worry about that. Maybe that error is something that normally happens and is fine. Okay, well then don't filter that one. You can just tell it to not filter that. The ones that were very interesting for me were when I started seeing things like the SP configure changes. Configuration options changed, XP command shell changed from 1 to 1, run the reconfigure statement to install. Now, I have not yet found a way to track when someone runs reconfigure. I'm still working on that, and if I find it, I'll update my scripts. But I like how this tracks it, because this lets me know what someone ran. Now, it may not be something that somebody specifically is, maybe they're not trying to be malicious, but maybe somebody did set something on your system. And by them setting it on your system, it is now going to cause issues, because when it reboots, now we're going to have a configuration change that could be going into effect. Maybe it could be malicious at that point. So it's very important for me to know if somebody's making modifications and changes. So I've got scripts for my clients that say, hey, we're going to be doing maintenance. And if I see, you know, a change from, you know, let's say a 0 to a 1, I'm going to go look at my SP configure, or sys configurations, and say, well, what's my current running value? Oh, it's a 0 currently. And if I reboot, I'm going to switch it. Oh, I've got a problem. I don't want to do that. So I can take a look into that situations. If there's specific ones that you're looking for, you have the sys messages internal table, and message language ID, you know, 1033 for English, and 14,000 different error logs or errors that you can then go ahead and say, hey, that one is important to me. I am seeing that, and it's important, and I really want to know. Tons of them in here. Again, you know, I say I want every Sev 16 or higher. Maybe on a system, I know that there's a lot of stuff that I can just ignore. Maybe on a dev system, you know, the devs are just going to be guessing and checking, and you don't need to know every time it says, hey, you forgot, you know, what is the word sell at tech, you know, instead of select, you know, we don't need to know that. But maybe on a production system, you want every single time. So, you know, here's the list. If you're specifically saying, hey, I want to know everything that has the word error, you know, you can pull that, or you want to find certain DBCCs, or you want to find access denied, you can pull those all out of there and then add them to your own company's, you know, what are we looking for? So do be aware that, you know, also with extended events, just to throw that out there again, that it uses short circuit filtering. So it's going to first say, is anything higher than a Sev 16? Yep. All right. We're not even going to evaluate the rest of these. So that's how I've built it in there. You can put a whole bunch of specific, you know, or, you know, if you just want specific errors, that works too. And like I find it just helps very much in just knowing kind of what's going on in your system, permissions issues, you know, to be, again, you're getting to that proactive stage of knowing what's going on your system. So that's, anybody have any questions regarding that? Guess I'll take that as a no. So
you said these are on your GitHub.
Can you post a link to that? Yes, I will post it in the chat. But let me see if I can find what my GitHub is. Just see if I can remember what my name was. Dan the SQL Man is what it's under in the DTSM XE. And so I've got a lot of different ones in here. I try to you know, have that in there. These are under you know, error reported with table to file target. So that one's how it kind of extracts it out, puts it into the file target. I've got a lot of other ones in here. I try to always save all my extended events that I create for various things. If you are running, here's a good one. If you're running on 2008 or 2008 R2, you do have extended events. They're kind of different. They use some different wordage. And this will let you start finding every deprecated feature that's currently running on your system. You know, start running it now. Run it on all your systems, actually, your deprecation announcement, so that if you are planning an upgrade, hey, I already know that SPDB option is already deprecated. So if we're going to upgrade from 2008 to 2016, we need to make that modification in our code. We got to be ready for that. And it's great information to have to say, oh, hey, by the way, I already went through all of our source control. I've already changed all the SPDB option commands to alter database, and I have it in my own branch ready. So boss, when you're ready, we can just go ahead and merge my branch in, and we're ready to go ahead and get that 2016 upgrade out of the way. 2008 is not in support anymore, boss. So that's how I've used this. I also work on some stuff for SQL audit and making, I'm trying to get a base solution for people just to be able to kind of download and use, because I believe everybody should be running SQL audit on every single server that you work on, because invariably you will be asked a question at some point that audit would have solved for you. So I am found at Dan the SQL Man on Twitter, and you can email me, danthesqlman at lavabit.com, and I will answer questions on extended events and SQL audit. Happy to help out in that regard. Or you can also email at kansascity@pass.org, and I will receive those emails as well. And with that, I will go ahead and then stop sharing here and pass it back over to Kevin for his second session.